What's up guys, I'm Fedor Holz and today I will talk about the 5 biggest pots in my life or the most memorable. In tournaments, it is quite difficult to say how much equity there was in one pot, and there were probably a lot of painful ones that I've lost, but also some incredibly lucky ones or big ones that I won. So the spectrum is pretty wide and it's hard to say, oh, this was 500k equity or 1 million equity. There were probably a lot of couple 100k equity ones, but I will share the 5 ones that were the most memorable to me. I will actually start out with number 5, which happened in a Macau private cash game. And it was one really memorable one because back at that time it was cash-wise, I think one of the biggest ones that I played by myself. I think I had 100% or 80 or 70% action of myself in that game. It was a really big cash game. I think we played 5k, 10k, 20k. So that was like a 1k, 2k euro game. I sat there with maybe 300 or 400k euros in front of me. One of the most memorable hands I played in this game was there was a recreational player to my right from Malaysia, I believe. He, I think, played semi-regularly or played regularly poker. I don't remember the exact pre-flop action. Flop was jack high. I don't remember it was jack 5-3 or jack 5-4. I think I have ace-6 with a backdoor flush draw. He bets on the flop. I call. I think I turn an open ender, so it must have been jack 5-3-4 or jack 5-4-3. He bets again. I call. And the river was, I think, a 9. And he bets now and was crazy nervous. I just felt like the guy's bluffing, and now I'm sitting there with ace-6 and I'm like, okay, what are the most likely bluffs he can have? I tanked for 2 or 3 minutes. At that time, this was a pretty big game for me. Probably second or third biggest pot I ever played in my life in terms of cash game at this specific point in time. And I was thinking and I looked at him and I was just like, my gut feeling was just this guy's bluffing. And I call for probably 250k euros or dollars, something like that on the river. And he taps the table and he turns around his hand and he has ace-8 and I lose with ace-6, and because I have to mark my hand. He was like so confused that he won the pot. Better ace-high. I had to look at the board like 3 times to just make sure that his 8 kicker plays. I had to rebuy. Turned out I won a lot in the game. We played until 6 a.m. Then I had to get the ferry over to Hong Kong and fly back home. But that was one of the most fun games I actually played. It was a really cool game with like nice conversations and like crazy action. So that was one hand that definitely stuck in my memories. In terms of the 4th, the next one was being all in against Dan Smith. In the 100k, one drop, 2016 for the bracelet. Not necessarily for the equity. I think it was a lot of equity, probably a couple 100,000. But just the emotions, the raw emotions. I think I get it in with a open-ended straight draw and flush draw or something. Was it gut shot and flush draw or open ender and flush draw? And I think he has top pair, something like that. Maybe I got the details wrong, but I think I hit the straight right on the turn and he's drawing that, and it was just like this burst of emotions, like so euphoric, and I was so happy in that moment. It was just like the culmination of my success in 2016. It was just really nice. My first bracelet was such a great moment for me. So that was definitely one of the most meaningful pots I ever played. And there's a few interesting other ones. So 3, that's one that was probably one of the most emotional ones for me in terms of biggest equity. I'm not so sure. I had a really big piece of me in the 300k and I play a hand against Justin Bonomo. So I assume that's probably for maybe $1 million or more in equity. I think the pot was for probably 10 starting stacks or so. The hand goes something like open, I 3-bet button, I believe, cut off a button with Jack 10 suited, Justin, cold 4 bets, I think the small blind, we are quite deep, I call and we flop a flush. So I think 3-5-7, it was like 3 low cards, definitely a 5 in there. Not sure if it's 3-5-7 or 2-3-5, but like basically that board, I flop a flush and then I think the turn is a 5. So 3-5-7, 5 deuce, that might have been the board. And it goes bet, call, bet tiny turn. I think I raise the turn and then he checks, and on the river, I jam for maybe 2/5 pot on river. It might have been half pot, but I guess something between a third and half pot, not more than half pot, I would say. And he goes into the deep tank. I think he burns like 4 time bangs, like 2 minutes. And obviously after he's not snap calling, I feel very, very good. I think there's basically only king queen that he might really think with. So it's one combo that I could see him like going deep into the tank with for some reason, but I feel super comfortable. I think he has like aces or kings with the spade, I believe it was, spade or club. And then he calls and turns over ace king, the nut flush. And I was like, I didn't know really what to say. I don't know what was going through his mind, that I have fives or I don't really know what his thought process was. Flop the set, or I don't know what he was thinking for with that SPR. But like this moment was so emotional. Like I was 100% sure I'm going to win this hand after he took more than 10 seconds. My world just broke in that moment. I was so in there. I was so competitive. I just wanted to continue playing. It was basically like either he calls and I have 3 million, or he folds and I have whatever, 2.3 or 4 million. And then he calls and turns over the nut flush. And I was just like, I just lost my mind in that moment. So definitely one of the most emotionally meaningful moments in terms of playing poker for me in my career. And then I want to share a hand from another tournament hand that was really big, and that emotionally, it was just like the roller coaster of emotions, that one, which is number 2 of my biggest pots. And a lot of people know this one, tens in the 1 million one drop. Obviously getting it in against ace king and ace 5 of Rick Solomon and I think David Peters. Just insane swing of emotions. The flop I think is ace king jack, or ace king low and then jack on the turn. I think that's the run out. And man, just the emotions in that moment, like opens the ace and I'm like, fuck. And then jack on the turn I think gives ace 5 also a nut flush draw. And then that 10 on the river, just like binking it off, and just like this outburst of like, I'm still in there, like I have huge chips now, or huge chip stack, and I can continue playing in one of the biggest tournaments that has ever been held. Like that was a very, very meaningful pot in my career. Unfortunately, I didn't win. Justin Bonomo again, but that was a very, very big pot for me. And then number 1, one of, or probably the biggest pot in terms of raw cash. Maybe I played bigger equity hands, but I played a 4K, 8K cash game in Barcelona. The first, second or third hand I sit down, I get jacks and I get it in for a 1.8 million euro pot with jacks against aces, which was probably a really terrible get-in. Yeah, I just somehow decided to 4-bet and then I called off the shove. I didn't like it, obviously. I wasn't stupid. It went like 2.5 open, 10 BB, 3-bet, and then I 4-bet to 26 and call off the shove. And I was just like, ugh, okay. And he has aces and I'm just down like 800K or 900K and like right off. And that was like emotionally, I mean, it's not really just that hand, but it was more that session that I played over a few days. It was the biggest cash game I ever played. The first time I played such a big game, buying in for 1 million euros. I don't think I've ever been so adrenaline, like just every hand mattered so much. I was just in there playing my best. And then it got really short stacked because we played with the straddle. So it was 4K, 8K, 16K. So we played 50, 60 big blinds deep, crazy blinds. And I turned it around in the next 3 days. I won almost 2 million and made up my mistake. And I'm really happy that I did that and that it went well. But I also think I absolutely played my best and did really well in that game. So that was probably the biggest like cash pot I ever played. There were lots of 100K pots, lots of couple 100K equity swings, but those were my 5 most memorable and kind of biggest emotional or cash-wise pots. If you guys like this type of content, I'd really appreciate if you leave a subscribe. It keeps me motivated to put out more content, just shows the support, and I really appreciate it. And if you guys want to share your biggest pot, I'd love to hear what's the biggest pot or most meaningful pot you've ever played in your career. And I see you in the next video. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to support the channel and stay always up to date, then leave a subscribe here or check out our next video.